I've been having a hard time adjusting. Had the shiniest wheels, now they're rusting. Didn't know if you'd care if I came back. Have a lot of regrets about that. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Mandy Margaret page. Today I am going to be doing a video about Folklore, specifically Folklore the Long Pond studio sessions that just went live, and this will be the next installment in the Mental Health in the Media series. I plan on expanding on this a lot because I've noticed that there are a lot of movies that I want to talk nonstop about the mental health things they discuss and stuff like that, and just how they impact me and the emotional skills that they teach people. And honestly, well, that's because I'm thinking a lot about Inside Out, let's be honest. But I wanted to do a video actually on the last one that Taylor Swift made called Miss Americana, and I actually wrote my notes for this one right below all of my notes for the last one that I recorded and never posted. So we're gonna post this one. 2 quick warnings. First is going to be a humble bias warning. I have loved Taylor Swift for a very long time, so I am biased in a lot of things here. I've loved her since I was, I don't know, middle school. So I am recognizing my own bias. That's out of the way. The next thing is I am going to do a content warning, not only for the discussion in this video, but also if you choose to watch the Folklore Long Pond studio sessions, if you choose to listen to the album Folklore, there are kind of some content warnings that can be hard because topics can ebb and flow, right? And we can all have different interpretations. The content warning I would give for this is that there is mention of things like suicide, mental illness, alcohol, and there's also mention of the current pandemic. There's also a quick mention of things like grief, loss, complex relationships, and I feel silly saying some of those, but at the same time, I would rather warn people of what they're going into, because I know for me, Folklore, as much as I love it, there are songs on the album that I actually never listened to the point where when somebody asked me my favorite song, I said the wrong one because the song that hits closest to me, I can't listen to very often, but we'll talk about that. I decided I would break this video up into kind of chronological order with what they did, and hopefully that helps keep it concise and clear, but we all know that the conciseness is where I struggle. So that being said, 3-minute intro done, probably. Don't really know because the dogs bark in between, so I can't check. But let's start talking about this incredible documentary and some of the themes that it touches on that are really important. Taylor Swift starts by describing the beginning of lockdown as listless and purposeless. And she also says that if we're going to recalibrate everything, we should start with what we love. And that line was actually in the trailer promo for it. And I remember hearing that and just thinking, wow, that's such an important thing that I wish I had thought of at the very beginning of lockdown. I wish that I had thought at the very beginning of quarantine, whatever it's called by you, social isolation, whatever it is. I wish that I had started with what I loved, and I think it would have made me easier. I got there after a couple months, but I was grateful they acknowledged this, that not everybody was finding purpose and they were having their purpose changing. I know for me personally, I had a lot of my personal and professional things heavily impacted in the last 6 months and 7 months. Time has no meaning, it's 2020. And so to hear somebody say that felt powerful, to understand that this album came from that same place that I felt like I was in, and I'm sure a lot of people felt like they were in, and to recognize what it can become, and to recognize that we don't have to be productive in this time, but if what we love is something like music, we can put our time into that. Does it happen to be their careers in this? Yes, so it's a little different. But then they go and they talk about each individual song right before it. I'm not going to touch on every single one. This video would be way too long, and I just don't have a lot to add to some of them. Some of them are just really cool stories, like the story about the person who owned Taylor Swift, one of Taylor Swift's homes, before she owned it, and I don't have a lot of commentary to say on that, or there's things I don't relate to, so I'm just not going to cover them. One of the things I have always loved about Taylor Swift is that I think her lyrics are genius. I think she's an astounding writer, and I love words. So I love to just sit and listen to the complex way that people describe things, and she has a lyrical genius in a way that brings you through a story in a song, and this entire album brings you through so many different stories. One of the things that she does with this incredible skill is she really captures some very dynamic relationships, and that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with talking about the song My Tears Ricochet. What she talked about in this specific scenario that she describes is somebody that's going through divorce, and how this person who used to be your everything, this person who used to be the person you tell everything to some extent, ends up using those things against you. And my favorite line in that song, I think, is, if I'm dead to you, why are you at the wake? And this is something that I used to struggle a lot with, is this idea that we have these people that we trust wholeheartedly. And I've unfortunately been in some really strenuous and stressful and exhausting, frankly, relationships where at the end of the relationship, I still have this fear sometimes. I constantly have this fear that they're going to take something that I said to them, something that I experienced with them, whatever the case may be, and they're going to hold it against me. But the flip side of that is that I've also noticed that some of those people don't really let go of you. They would still be with you until your very last day, even if you didn't want them there. Some were made to, I don't know the exact lyric, but the lyric says something like, some were made for throwing stones and some were made for diamond rings. And I think that we should really take that into consideration, that relationships change over time, and that can be confusing, distressing, and frustrating, and letting go of those people and still having them as a part of your life, I think, is challenging. So that was something I loved overall about this album, though, was that a song like My Tears Ricochet really captures just the true dynamic nature of human relationship, which is something I am fascinated by, and embraces the fact that it changes. The next thing they talk about in this film, I am skipping around here, so I'm going chronologically in what I'm talking about, but this doesn't necessarily mean it's the next thing. The next song we're going to talk about is Mirrorball. And the topic that came up for this one is that we're different versions of ourselves around different people. And not only is that true, that is something that I wish we talked about more, because there are times where I will feel like I turn on this camera and I'm a different person. I'm a different person when friend A comes over. I'm a different person when I'm around friend B. I'm a different person at work. But for me, that interpretation becomes that I am a fake person. Or maybe I'm not the person I want to be. There are times where I'm around certain people and I don't like the person I become around them. And the other thing that I love about the conversation they have here is they have this stream of quotes, essentially. And they're having this conversation and they say, do the broken thing and make it look good. Do the broken thing and make it fun. Do the broken thing and make it cool. Do the broken thing and make it appealing, for lack of a better term, and then be okay. And Taylor Swift responds to this and says, and then be okay when the lights go out. But what is a disco ball when the lights go out? It's a bunch of broken pieces, essentially. And this beautiful song becomes this extended metaphor for all of those things, for the fact that we reflect the person we're around sometimes, for the fact that we are sometimes broken into a million pieces, but that we're still working to make the lives of others around us better. And it kind of addresses something that I think can be disorienting for some of us. What is our identity if our identity is always changing? But if we all knew that we were all changing, would it be more acceptable for us to understand that we're not necessarily a different person, but we are a different version of ourselves depending on the person we're around? And how do we learn to adjust the person we want to be versus the person we think people want to see? The next song we're going to be talking about is 7, now that my dog has moved the camera and almost broken it. And they're now playing in the background, so we're just going to deal with it. And the first thing that Taylor Swift is saying is that she gives you this picture of, she's in a supermarket and she sees a kid throwing a tantrum and they throw themselves on the ground. And it got her questioning, when did we stop doing that and why? And things like that. And I felt personally attacked during this part. For those of you that don't know, I spent the better part of 4 years working in supermarkets, so I can confirm that this happens all the time. And now I actually work with children, so just in case you hear it in the background, the dogs are fine, they're just playing. They were fine, but they were breaking things, so I had to put them outside. Christmas trees up, dogs love it. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. It was interesting because then Jack Antonoff is talking, and Jack Antonoff kind of turns back to Taylor Swift and says, oh, well, and where do those things go? Not when did they stop, but where do those emotions go? And that's what got me to think of, is where do those big emotions go? Because we, of course, to some extent, we're maturing, we're learning how to cope better, we're learning how to communicate those emotions in ways that do not involve us throwing our body on the floor in the middle of the cereal aisle because we want Frosted Flakes, and Mom won't let us get Frosted Flakes. Not based on a true story. So that was already something that I thought was a really powerful statement, is if we're not learning new coping tools and we're not learning how to communicate better, then our big emotions become unable to be dealt with. And that is true of any age. But the next thing in this series of conversation that really caught my attention was at the end of it, Taylor Swift is saying something about how, what do we lose in growing up? What are we losing of those emotions? But it kind of got me to thinking, what do we not have to lose that we're giving up? What are we able to hold on to? And a lot of the time, there is this running joke in my friend group, in my life, that I am just a Disney fanatic. And yes, one of these movies, like I've already mentioned, will be Inside Out, which I struggle to call a children's movie, but that's its own conversation. But I love singing around my house and dancing with my pets and dressing up and doing things that make me feel like I'm 5 again. I still have some of my old journals and I read them to remember those big emotions, because I do think that we do have to move on from some things. We do have to grow up, of course. But how many things are we doing because it's culturally inappropriate to partake in something that we loved? And that's something that comes up a lot for me because, again, like I mentioned, I love very childish things like Disney. And I've noticed that when I was going to go to something like Disney on Ice, and I was the only adult there without a child, mind you, and so many people would bring that up, and I would say, yeah, but that's not a sign of immaturity. It's a sign that I'm holding on to some part of my childhood that allows me to see beautiful things in the world, that allows me to see magic in the world, that allows me to see a different side of the world that sometimes it's very hard to find as an adult, because when you're an adult, you start to realize that villains are not just made for stories and they're a part of our everyday life. But does that mean that magic can be too? Does that mean that we can find some degree of hope in the magic of our own childlike mind? And that was just what it kind of got me thinking about. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that. I kind of have gotten to a point in my life where I think this idea of a mature child is irksome to me a little bit. It makes me uncomfortable because I didn't love the parts of myself that were mature sometimes. And I was often called a mature child, wise beyond my years, whatever it was when I was 7. And what does that even mean? And what are we imposing on children by saying these things? So anyway, that was probably the one that got me thinking the most. It got me thinking about the children I work with. It got me thinking about the children I want to work with in the future. And it got me thinking about the child I was and the childlike person that I can be at times when I need to be. And I think that's okay. So let me know what you guys think about that. I wasn't expecting to go on that much of a with that, but that's where it went, and I just took the train there. The next song is the one that is probably my favorite song on the album, but it hits so close to home that I actually can't listen to it very often. And that is the song This Is Me Trying. And Taylor Swift starts the introduction to this. I'm going to read this because I think this is the exact quote. I've been thinking about addiction and about people suffering through mental illnesses. They have an everyday struggle. No one pats them on the back every day, but every day they are actively fighting something. As somebody who's a long-time Swiftie, like I mentioned before, having this person that I do not know personally, but that has been there for me through a lot of emotional things, whether she knows that or not, which she obviously does not, having a hero of mine, in essence, recognize that every single day can be trying for someone with mental illnesses was so validating on so many levels. And the first time that I listened to that song, I remember feeling lost. I was listening to it the first time during quarantine, and I remember feeling lost. I remember feeling confused, conflicted, sad. I was struggling. I relapsed with behaviors that I'd never really relapsed with since their inception years before. I felt scared. I felt weak. I felt ashamed. I felt like a liar. I felt fake. I felt so many things. And then I actually felt scared hearing this song a little bit, because I felt like this person who has never met me, who has never known me, who I've only seen from 1,000 feet away at I don't know, I'm terrible at measuring, but who I've only seen in stadiums of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, I don't know how many people fit in a stadium. I've only seen her in those contexts. I've only seen her through my screen. We've never met. We've never spoken. And she was capturing this very privately painful part of my life. this is the song that I'm going to give a heavy content warning for if you're someone who's struggling, because it can be hard to hear it. And I'm not going to lie, the first time that I heard it, it opens up with this line that is essentially a person contemplating taking their life. And that moment was challenging to hear as someone with lived experience with suicidal ideation. And it also felt really good to hear that this mantra of this is me trying, because sometimes I feel like we have to validate our existence. And if we're somebody who struggles with mental health, like myself, I feel like sometimes I have to validate that I didn't do the dishes today because all I could do today was get myself out of bed, or I didn't clean my entire house because therapy was really hard this week. It's not always necessarily that I wasn't able to do a dish. It's that I was doing such hard work in therapy that I couldn't be around my friends. I couldn't do fun things. And sometimes I feel like I want my friends to really understand that this is me doing the best I can. This is me trying. And when I feel like a failure, I need to remind myself of that. You are trying. You're working really hard to stay alive. And sometimes it feels dramatic to say that. It feels dramatic to say that it's work to keep yourself alive every day. But there are days with depression where it's work to get myself out of bed. There are days with anxiety where it's work to enter any zone of discomfort, essentially, to go to any party, to go to any person's house. Granted, right now, quarantine is a whole different ballgame with that. But I hope that what I'm saying is making sense, because it does feel something that's almost too deeply personal to even have an intellectual way to describe the feeling that I was experiencing listening to this song and feeling seen. And I will tell you the honest truth that after hearing this song, I was able to tell somebody in my life that I had been relapsing into some old, unhealthy, dangerous behaviors that had to do with mental health issues. And I was very grateful that I could have this private, painful, but seen moment that allowed me the opportunity to bridge that gap to my personal life. And that wasn't something I was expecting from this album. They had this period where they kept saying, you have no idea, you have no idea, you have no idea. And it's an isolating feeling. And he then says, I think that's funny because it's the thing that we actually all have in common, which I think is a really valid point. And it's part of the reason why I actually like doing these videos, whether one person watches them or if it's just me rewatching them or if it's just one of my friends. I like doing these videos because it reminds me that there is somebody out there who might be able to see this and relate to it and understand that we're not alone. We just don't know how to have these conversations in person sometimes. I am very sorry that if the lighting changed or anything, because my camera battery, I talked too much about this as me trying, so I'm going to continue. But my camera battery died. So yeah, here we are. I tried to get it as close as I could. It also goes through this other storyline in it where it's talking specifically about this idea, and Taylor Swift mentions this, that, and I think we've talked about it on this channel before, that high school, middle school, elementary school, college even, there's all of these moments for accolades. There's all of these awards that are given. And if you're a student that was very successful and experienced those things, it is so confusing, disorienting, and challenging when you step away from school and you stop having those opportunities. And yes, there are career paths that maybe it's more common to have those experiences. There are management styles that lend themselves to that. But I don't think there's anything that is really comparable to the times in high school and middle school and elementary school. And it led to me being disappointed in myself all the time. And I still do sometimes. And there are days where I recognize that I will always recognize that I can do better. I have a lot to learn. I have a lot of growth to do. But it's challenging sometimes because I feel like I should already have crossed whatever milestones. I feel like I should be doing more. I feel like I should be more successful, whether that be in my professional career, whether that be in my personal life. I feel like I should be better. And there are times where not having that recognition makes it much easier to question that. It's hard. I end up feeling like if you've heard of imposter syndrome before, I have that a lot of the time. I have that experience a lot. It makes me scared to go back to grad school, if I'm honest, because it is such an inferior feeling to constantly be questioning your worth. And I think this song does a good job. And one of the lines it says in the song is, I was so ahead of the curve that the curve became a sphere. And then to have somebody validate it and say that there is trying times that everybody is going through every single day. Nobody's being rewarded today because they're taking care of their child or their parent. Nobody's being rewarded today for taking care of bills, helping the person on the street. Nobody's being rewarded for those things. And it's not necessarily that we should be. It's not necessarily that you need a gift every time these things happen, or recognition even. But I don't think that it's so much about the recognition as it is about the culture that we can be brought up in, and then how our actual lifestyles do not match the culture that we're raised in, and that can create kind of this cognitive dissonance. It can create this gap in what we know versus what we're experiencing. And that, I think, was a point in that song that we should all be addressing for ourselves, for our own sanity, that you're probably not getting credit today. I'm not getting credit today for stopping my dog from biting this. Buddy, here, get your toy, get your toy. You're probably not getting credit today for whatever person you're taking care of. You're probably not getting credit today for if you take care of your mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or your kids or your pets or your friends, and you're not going to get credit for the late nights that you have spent helping someone. You're not going to get credit for the books that you're reading just because you want to be a knowledgeable person, or for the time that you've committed to becoming whatever the best version of yourself is, the time you maybe have committed to learning new coping strategies or therapy or all of these things that we are not recognized for after being brought up in a culture of recognition, award, trophy. There comes a time in our life where the trophies stop, but the work doesn't. And where are we going to get that same feeling from? And I think this song captures that, and this conversation captured that. And I was really grateful they brought that up, because it's something we as a culture need to acknowledge, and we as individuals need to be aware of, so that it doesn't become a self-blame thing. The very last song we're going to talk about is called Epiphany. And part of the reason that I wanted to talk about this is that trauma is something that is being talked about a lot more now, but it's something that a lot of us are still failing to understand, recognize in ourselves, recognize in others. And Taylor Swift does a beautiful job in this song drawing a parallel between what soldiers face when they go to war and what frontline workers are facing right now. This is just another one of those songs that I have trouble listening to because it's heartbreakingly true. And she talks about it, but the song is just, it captures so well. And one of the things it says is, and some things you just can't speak about. One of the people she brings up when she's talking about this is her grandfather, and she talks about the fact that her grandfather was a veteran, and that her grandfather just never spoke about it. He never spoke about what he experienced, what he saw, and how she perceives that that might be what's going to happen next. And for those that are experiencing this trauma, that is now going to be repeated trauma as cases are rising again, and there's going to be a lot of people back in the hospital. Trauma is this really complex thing that it lives in our body and impacts so many different things. There's a great book that I'm reading right now that I haven't gotten all the way through yet, but I will do a book review once I finish it. Part of the reason I'm not giving the name for the book yet is because I do want to finish it, and I do want to read some of the background information on it before I talk too much about it. But essentially, what the book talks about is how our body holds trauma, how it can be held in your stomach in the way that maybe you end up with digestion problems, how it can be held in your thought patterns, how it can be held in your sleeping patterns, how it can be held in all of these things that impact your whole body, how it can be held in your fight or flight response, how it can be held in those things that maybe our bodies react so violently to, even if they're not necessarily a life-threatening situation. It puts our body into fight or flight. It puts our body into save your life mode, essentially. And I think that to discuss trauma in a song and to correlate that trauma is more than one thing, especially amidst people facing a level of trauma that they already may have been familiar with in their line of work, but that this is on a new level than anybody ever signed up for, prepared for. The song has a line, and I don't know the exact line right now, but the line talks about the fact that there's some things that med school doesn't prepare you for, and things like watching somebody or having to tell somebody that their loved one is gone. And I want to end it here because I do want to take a moment to thank every single frontline essential worker that is coping with things that I cannot even imagine right now. I truly cannot put to words what your work means to me on many different levels. I've known a couple of people that have, thank God, survived. I've had a couple of people that I know that were asymptomatic. I've had a couple of people that have had mild to medium symptoms. And I have unfortunately watched people pass away from this. People that were astounding and people that didn't deserve it. I've watched people be hospitalized that were perfectly healthy. And it's one thing to have to see that when it comes into contact with my own life. It's an entirely different thing to have to wake up every single day and to choose to continue this work. So to all of you frontline medical workers, essential workers, people that are dealing with this type of stuff every single day, thank you. You are so appreciated. And I would emotionally prepare yourself before listening to this song again. I think that would be the disclaimer through the whole album, but I do think it's worth listening to, and I do think that it's a conversation we need to have more often about how trauma is not one thing. When I was first taught trauma, I was taught trauma in regards to only two scenarios. Those two scenarios were things that involved assault of some kind and things that had to do with war. And unless you were a soldier or a survivor of something of that classification, then you didn't have trauma. That's how it was taught to me. And that's also how I perceived it. So maybe it wasn't, I don't blame the teachers that were teaching me this. I'm grateful that we're learning more about how to talk about trauma, how to understand trauma, that we're doing more research in this. And I really hope that the fruits of that labor are that we're able to help these incredible workers right now. I don't really think that there's anything I could bring up after that other than, again, to say thank you. All of this being said, I really loved this movie. I love the ways the songs intersect. Outside of a mental health perspective, I just really love to listen to them. I love to laugh with them, and I love to cry with them. But I definitely need to have emotional space for some of the songs when I listen to them, which I think is incredible because I think that that means they're well written, they are powerful, and that is art to me. So clearly, I love the album. For those that don't know, this is Folklore merch, and I tried to find, I have a signed Folklore CD, but it is in my car, so I couldn't find it because my car is not in right now. I highly would recommend this just for the music. I would recommend it for the stories. I would recommend it for the impact. There's a lot woven into this documentary. There's a lot woven into this album. And I think that then when you listen to it from your own perspective, you also weave in your own experiences, which I think is incredible. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you like content like this. I know that usually when people would do reactions that I watch, commentary channels, they would actually have like clips here instead of just, you know, quoting like I do. So if that's something you guys are interested in, let me know and I will try to learn. I'm not the most tech savvy person on the planet, but oops. Wow, evidence. I am not the most tech savvy person on the planet, but I will try my best. Before I go, I am also going to let you know that the pets do now have a TikTok because I have caved and I want cute videos of my pets. They are called Reminder Rescues, and the idea behind it is that we are going to be posting reminders for you. So they're just going to be cute videos of the dog, nothing too heavy. They're just going to be cute videos, and the name just comes from the fact that I know that I forget stuff a lot, so I'm hoping that this forces me to remember things like drinking water and self-care and, you know, taking my vitamins, things that I forget every single day. So I am hoping that'll help me remind myself because I'll be taking videos of the pets. And for those of you that don't know, the rescues part of it is because we have the 5 rescues in the home. 1 is lived on the streets, 2 are from shelters, and the other 2 are from private rescue not-for-profit organizations. So we love all of our rescues, and we hope you love them too. So be sure you go subscribe to that. If you have any requests, you can always put them in the comments, reach out to me through the Facebook page, wherever you want. And all of that being said, thank you if you got to this point in the video. I hope everybody has a wonderful week, and we'll talk soon. Give me a piece of like the perfect place to cry. I'm dead no, not without my muse. That would be such an expensive plane ticket for us because I'd have to bring all the pets. Hey, look at how my tears ricochet. And I could go anywhere I want. anywhere I want, just not home. Betty, I won't make assumptions about why you changed your homeroom, but I think it's 'cause of me. I think I've seen this film before, and I didn't like the ending. I'm not your problem anymore. So what am I defending now? You were my town, now I'm in exile seeing you out. Guess you never know, never know. And if you wanted me, you really should have showed it. I fall down, down. Watch you breathing, watch you breathing now. Oh, step right out. There is no amount of pride I can do for all this time. We always walked a very thin line. Didn't even hear me, didn't